Welcome to the Kiwi Mana Day. Hi, great you could make it. This is episode 78 of our beekeeping podcast. This week we are talking about adapting honeybees, surplus secrets, that's interesting, and International Podcast Day. Now, what's that all about?
Indeed, International Podcast Day is today. It's the day when podcasters around the world try and encourage other people to listen to podcasts. And we've got some interesting sound clips coming up.
Awesome.
And executive producers this month are, again, Lauren Hoffman and Aaron Jennings from Jennings Apiaries. So check out Jennings Apiaries for all your honey requirements.
And we'd also like to do a shout out to one of our other patrons, Graham. We're thinking of you. We hope all goes well. And yeah, healing.
Absolutely. And we went to visit him in hospital and gave him a soft toy bee. So hopefully that bee's helping you there, Graham.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's move on.
Okay. And hi, well, I'm Gary.
And I'm Margaret, and we are beekeepers from the very wet hills of the Waitakere Ranges in West Auckland, New Zealand. Our podcast is about beekeeping, gardening, and a bit of politics about environmental issues because we know how they affect the bees. And also we've been known to go off in
tangents
about other things as well. So
mainly Margaret.
Yeah, cheers, Gary. Okay.
And the show notes for this podcast are kiwi.bz/78. And thanks for listening today, guys. We know life is busy and it's becoming into the bee season for New Zealanders, so we really appreciate you've taken the time to join us today.
Yeah, very slow start to the season, isn't it, Gary?
Very slow, weather very bad.
Yeah, bees very
rain.
hungry, but we'll go into that a bit more. So what's been happening at Kiwi Mana, Gary?
Okay, so what's happening? Well, sad news this week from New Zealand. Dr. Peter Molan's passed away, unfortunately, so that's very sad news for his family, and we pass all our condolences on to them. It's really sad, isn't it?
Yeah, we're thinking of you, Alison, and the family down there in Hamilton, and our thoughts go out to you at this time.
Absolutely, and Peter was the guy that discovered Manuka honey's medicinal purposes. And later on in the show notes, we'll talk about a talk we recorded from him that explains his story. So it's really interesting.
And we definitely need to celebrate this man who discovered the Manuka factor. So we will have some books available if you want to have a look at his history, the book that was written by Cliff Van Eaton. So you can just email Margaret at Kiwi Mana if you want to get one of those books at a good price.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're also mentioned on the Will and Sarah's Spreadcast podcast, and they've mentioned us, and they're talking about the newsletter we wrote about the drone bees having no father. That was interesting, eh?
Yeah, that caused a few bits of conversations, working out how that all falls into place, but that was good. And we talk about grandfathers and stuff having impact on genetics as we go into some of the articles we go on to. And what else have you been up to, Gary?
Yesterday we met Oren Fox at the Auckland airport. So he's coming here to do a course and do some kayaking and hiking in New Zealand's great outdoors.
And who is Oren Fox, Gary?
Oren Fox is the guy that wrote the great beekeeping book called Do Beekeeping. And we interviewed him a while back, and that's coming out soon, probably in a couple of weeks. And
yeah, that'll be a good one.
Yeah, and we recorded some videos, and we had breakfast with Oren. It was great, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was great to meet this young man. When I first saw him, he was about 15 doing a TED Talk, and TED Talks are quite interesting, lots of different subjects that are discussed there, but to see this young man today and see how he's growing.
He's
definitely a beekeeper and a young man in the making, that's for sure.
Absolutely. Great guy, and he's into chickens and bees, so his book's really good.
Yes, and he was a bit, he told us that it was one chick that hatched before he left, so all the girls were looking after that one chick, so happy mothers.
Absolutely.
And where is Oren Fox from?
He's from a small place north of Boston in America, and he's been at school in California recently, and he's also been travelling to Nepal
Yeah, he's got some interesting stories, and lovely to meet this young man. And yeah, he's enjoying some time in New Zealand off the grid. So very exciting for him.
Absolutely. And also, there's a colony loss and survival survey happening at the moment in New Zealand. So if you can get involved in that, if you've lost any bees over the winter months, it's run by the Landcare Research. They're doing a survey, and we'll have the link in our show notes. And the show notes will be kiwi.bz/78.
I think that this one, we'd like to encourage you all to fill out this. It won't take long. It's very easy to do online. And you're just helping out with the research that is going on in New Zealand. I mean, a lot of this information is available through the annual disease returns that we fill, because we write down what hives we've lost over the season. So, but this is trying to encourage as many beekeepers as possible to fill in this research. So go for it, guys, and easy to get onto it. As Gary said, there's the link, and go for it.
Absolutely. And what's this about you being peed off with the weather?
Oh, I tell you what, man, I've had to be working through my beekeeper services, because at this time of the year, the annual disease returns for the AFB checks are ongoing, and they need to be in by November. But to be honest, for the last 8 weeks, the weather has been absolutely crappy, if I may say, and I've had to sort of be available at all sorts of times to go out and do a check with my customers. So most people have been very patient, but it is wearing a bit thin at this point, because we can't even do any apiary visits because it's so wet out there, and it's just the mud is just huge. So it means that the bees are in the hives longer. The customers need us to, need me to go there and help them with their treatment. So I've been going around doing the vaporization treatment for customers, because that's the treatment that is the best at this time with all this change in the weather, and it's much easier to achieve, even if it is a little bit increment out there. So yeah, the treatments are finding that there is a lot of varroa out there and a few colony losses, because people aren't keeping on top of it. They think there's no varroa in there, but they aren't even checking their cells. And the cells of the honeybees is where you will see the most mites. So working with the customers to make sure that their bees are doing well.
And a lot of bees are hungry as well, aren't they, we're finding?
Yes, this has affected us as well. And when we winter down our hives, we always leave a full box of honey on the top with the 10 frames of honey. And so the bottom box full of brood with a couple of honey frames, and then the top box full of honey. And because the bees have been so trapped in the colonies, they're actually eating through those full depth boxes of honey. So those supers are becoming empty, and if you don't catch it in time, those colonies can just suddenly fail because they're starving. And this is caused by the late spring weather plus the constant rain we're having here in Auckland, and hopefully that's not happening for other Kiwis, beekeepers around New Zealand. And from this, I'll lead on to the best food for bees. Now, the best food for bees is their own honey. Now, last year we were experimenting with a honey extractor, and it destroyed, because it was so powerful, it's just a testing one, it destroyed some honey frames. So what we've done is we've used those honey frames to make honey cakes, and the bees are just loving that. So they're easy to just put in on the top of the frames, and we've got some top feeders which enclose everything into the hive, because the other thing that's happening at the moment is that there's a lot of robbing going on, because people are not checking their hives regularly at the moment to make sure they have got food. So if you've only got one brood box and you've taken the honey off because you want the honey, I say think twice about that, because if you're going to want your honey, your bees to survive, they need food. And what we're finding is that they're starving, and then they're robbing other hives, and we've already seen quite a few cases of AFB because bees are robbing other colonies, and the other colonies are weak, and therefore just this continuing fall of colonies. So check your hives, make sure they have got plenty of honey. If you don't have any honey there, make a sugar syrup solution, which I'm always been, I've talked about how I'm against it. I'm not against it if it means that you're going to help your bees survive and give them a bit of a boost if they've run out of food. So
absolutely. And what about going to the supermarket and buying honey from the shop? Is that okay?
No. That is absolutely the worst thing you can do, because you can introduce through that honey that you don't know how healthy that honey is. It may just be an air-raised honey, so it's not even a really good food for them. So the best food for your bees is their own honey. And, you should always aim through your season to leave them with a box of honey for their own digestion, plus 2 or 4 in the brood box to surround the brood. So that's my advice. And
absolutely,
yeah, it's a tough one for us here in West Auckland, where it's very, very wet, and even in Auckland Central there's bees starting to rob out, and that's just going to spread AFB like wildfire.
Well, the thing is, you've got no way of checking the store-bought honey for AFB, have you? You can't go and check the frames that the honey came from. You don't know what the source of it is. So
absolutely, and the thing is too that it might have something else in it that you don't know that will not be helpful. The colonies that they come from could be totally using chemicals that you don't know about. So, you are adding another factor into your colony which you have no control over, and you might not notice the effects of it until winter. And then suddenly your hive collapses.
Indeed.
So do not feed store-bought honey.
Or even honey from someone else, unless you can be sure that it's been AFB free.
Yes, or any honey that you give to your bees must be from their own colony or from a hive that you are 100% sure is not full of any AFB. And the rule really is only give them their own honey.
Absolutely. Let's move on to blog recap. Blog recap. This is where we recap the top blog posts of the month. Number 1.
Oh, yeah, we're getting into basketball, aren't we?
No.
Oh, why not?
Number 1, Michael Jordan.
Oh, Michael Jordan, but he's not
his life,
the basketball guy.
He's the retired basketball player, now a bee whisperer.
No,
it's Michael Jordan, the naturopath beekeeper from Wyoming. And this was a great podcast. We interviewed Michael a while back, and he talks about his approach to beekeeping. And it's very interesting. And he makes mead, and he's a great guy. So check out the Bee Whisperer.
Yeah, if you haven't already listened, check out this one. And just to know that these podcasts that you're listening to now are becoming quite a popular thing in the world of communication. And it's like having a radio show at your beck and call, isn't it?
Absolutely. A radio show. It's time-shifted communication, they call that.
Ooh, la-dee-da.
And it's International Podcast Day today, so enjoy some more podcasts.
Okay, and yeah, check all different ones out. There's some really cool ones on motivation and how to set up businesses and all sorts of things. Okay, sorry, I digress.
And even beekeeping.
Yay!
Speaking of beekeeping, here is a bumper from Kevin's from the BK Corner.
Hi everyone, this is Kevin England from the Beekeepers Corner podcast. Besides the Kiwi Mana Buzz, one of my favorite podcasts is 99% Invisible by Roman Mars. Check it out if you've never heard it. I also listen to Windows Weekly from the This Week in Tech Network every week and never miss an episode. Happy International Podcast Day, everybody.
Thanks, Kevin, for that. That's fantastic.
Cheers. That's awesome. And what's the next top blog post, Dale?
It's our last podcast, Springing Along with Hoppity.
And how's Hoppity going?
Yeah, I'm going good. My foot's getting a bit better. I was hoping it'd be perfect now, but it's still not.
Yeah, it's a process, isn't it?
It's a pain. Anyway.
Good control there, Gary.
Good control.
And he's been, we've actually got a bit of a break at the moment. Well, Gary has from work, and he's been home helping out in the old workshop, and we've had customers coming to pick up stock. And the interesting thing about life at the moment is with all this rain, our driveway's looking a bit dodgy. And so
it does.
A bit of clay coming through, so this orange colour coming through.
So if you've got a low-hung car, then be careful.
Yeah, absolutely. And Gary's car, he just works through that, and he gets through. But
just go sideways.
Okay, what's next?
Next one, Tree Hive, Beehive, Part 2, Swarming. This was the article that you wrote about the rescue of a tree hive, beehive. Which, do you want to talk about that? Yeah,
it was a really interesting situation, and it seems to be a very popular blog, and some really cool photos on there on how we dealt with this tree hive, beehive. And part 2 is, not sure why it was called Swarming, but anyway, it's, check that one out, and then we'll be putting part 3 together very soon.
Cool. And last but not least, the man who discovered Manuka honey, that's Dr. Peter Molan, who recently passed away, unfortunately. But this is
definitely not least.
No, this is his talk in Hamilton that we recorded, and we released that on YouTube. And there's an article there about that, and it's it's a good talk, eh? It's all his story of how he did his work and all his travels around the world talking about Manuka honey. It's
very interesting man, and very down to earth and grounded. And you'll enjoy this, guys. And celebrating his success. Absolutely.
I think we all owe him a debt of gratitude for his work.
Absolutely.
Let's move on to beekeeping news. Beekeeping news you can use, and this one is called Some Honeybee Colonies Adapt in the Wake of a Deadly Mites. And this was a study done by Cornell University. I think by Tom Seeley's been involved in this. And what they did is they studied the DNA of some bees from the 1970s to the ones now, and they've discovered that the genetic diversity has been reduced in the wild bee colonies in the area. And this is suggesting only a few of the queens actually survived. And the other interesting was the surviving bees that have evolved, and they're actually smaller. And of course, Tom is the author of Honeybee Democracy, a great book about bee swarming.
Okay, so they're saying in this article that because wild bees aren't managed, they seem to be adapting very, very quickly, because wasn't it in the 1970s they've got some bees that they use the genetic makeup of those bees and compare them to current wild bees. And the assumption is that where there were surviving colonies, where there were males or failed colonies that still had male drones in there, that they were still contributing to this genetic change. So it was a really interesting article, and I can see how the bees would survive. Well, you can't breed from dead bees, so surviving wild colonies are really helping to, in the fight against the Varroa destructor mite.
Yes, absolutely. This is a great article indeed. So check that one out. And we had some feedback.
Hey, just going back to that, maybe people can look at trying to, I think top bar hives and hives where people are letting the bees draw their own comb might be a way to help with this as well. So maybe top bar hives and bench hives can have no foundation to see whether that's going to help manage the varroa situation.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting, this small cell thing. I mean, a lot of natural beekeepers subscribe to this idea, and I think it's working for them quite well, because we interviewed Michael Bush and he does this, and people like Dee Lusby as well also believe in it. So maybe it's got merit, because science is showing that that's actually what's happened.
Yeah, no, I think this is an interesting article. It's just another view on how we can cope with the varroa mite. So have a look at that, guys. It's interesting.
Absolutely, and we got some feedback from Rita James. She said maybe we could add apple cider vinegar to some water, and we could, because it's supposed to stop mites in birds. So that's an interesting idea, isn't it?
Okay, well, yes, we do love our birds, so interesting point. The other thing that you could put out is if you are going to feed your bees, not your birds, put it in a top feeder or some feeder that goes inside the hive, and reduce the entrance so that there's no robbing. And we always encourage people to put some thyme leaves in there, because once the bees digest and ingest the oil from the thyme, it can actually also help with varroa, because they don't want to feed off a bee that has thyme in its system.
Absolutely.
Handy hint. Okay, what's next, Gary?
Okay.
Oh, we talked about the Anthony Planakis from New York, the big New York.
Yeah, this one is
New York. Who thought you'd have some ideas about access holes with platforms? New York.
Yes. Surplus Secret. This is an article by Rusty in Seattle on the Great Honey Bee Suite blog. And this is the secret to surplus honey. Apparently, it can be access holes with platforms. And Anthony, from New York, he puts a little hole. It's a 5/8 hole, which is 16 mil.
Yeah, that's about a centimetre, just over a centimetre.
Centimetre and a half. Yep, that's right.
Yeah.
And
1 centimetre, 0.6.
That's it.
Okie dokie.
And he puts a little hole with a little entranceway, a little ramp. What do you call it? Like a little platform.
It's got a little platform that the bees can still land on, and go into the hives, and it's in each honey super. And the interesting thing that you notice here, what he's done is he's got a little entrance cover like we have on our robbing screens, so that they can still be shut off if necessary.
I actually spoke to Tony this morning on Twitter, so it was quite good. So he clarified some things for me. It was good.
Oh, and that's wonderful. Yeah, it's very good to have a conversation with these people who are doing these things that are successful. So
yeah, and I'll continue. He's been using this method since 1977, and he says, and he reckons that it doesn't get much robbing because the hole is so small and there's minimum guarding required.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things that was my concern about for us here in Auckland, New Zealand, where the robbers, like the wasps, would be just hammering those holes.
Absolutely.
So I think it would require some field testing for us, but he says it's working well, and I think that it looks like the bees are very happy. Well, and lots of them.
Let's do a field test. What we could do is do a hive without it and a hive with it, and see which one produces the most honey. And because he also uses queen excluders as well, doesn't he? And he reckons it doesn't make any difference with these entrances. So
yeah, I think that's interesting, because it just shows you that the foraging bees will go wherever they want to go, and it appears to me that they'll go straight to the honey super from what this article says.
Well, when you think about it, because at the moment what happens is the bees go to their main entrance and then they transfer the nectar to one of the worker bees, don't they? They regurgitate the and then they transfer it, and that worker bee's got to go all the way up the top through the queen excluder, and to do it. So I guess it's time, isn't it? If you can get if the field bee goes straight into the super, it must save a bit of time.
Oh yeah, I think that that this system seems to show that it is successful. So, yeah, I think a field test would be in order. What do you reckon?
A field test, yep,
Hey?
absolutely. We'll try that. And thanks, Tony, for your information. And he's also agreed to come on the podcast soon, so we'll get him on there.
Yeah, thanks for sharing this, because if you've been beekeeping for that long, we definitely need to hear as much about what you do as possible, because we love to share.
Absolutely. And he used to be a detective in New York, so that must be interesting.
Oh, that's a whole other story, man. That's amazing.
Yep.
And he worked for them collecting swarms.
Yep, also collecting swarms. So.
Yeah, so read this article. It's a great story about a great person who has tried it and succeeded.
Absolutely. And we got some feedback from Jennifer Finnocane. Thanks, Jennifer, for your feedback. Good website. This is talking about Rusty's one. And I've been using upper super interests for 4 years. Well worth the effort of drilling a hole. I use a dial-on-dial method to close the hole with core flute. That's a good idea.
Dial on, dial off.
Yep, that's it. Best of all, the bees love the upper entrances.
That's interesting, and yeah, good to get that feedback, Jennifer. Thanks for taking time to do that.
Absolutely. Let's play one of our clips we got from our listeners.
Oh, awesome.
Yep, this is from Will and Sarah at the Santa Mana homestead. Let's play that.
This is Sarah.
And Will.
Of the Original Transplants podcast, coming to you out of Satayama Homestead in Pennsylvania, USA.
Our favorite beekeeping podcast is the Kiwi Mana Buzz. Bzz, bzz.
Oh,
cheers for that. That was awesome.
thanks,
and,
guys, and
thank
thanks
you.
Thanks for liking our podcast.
Absolutely.
And we didn't pay anybody to say those things.
No, it was easy to do. Just go on to our homepage on our website and click a button and go for it.
Absolutely. I've got to talk more about that later, actually, because I've got a funny message about that.
Yes,
we'll talk about
important to share these things.
Anyway, let's move on. The controversial flow hive. This is controversial, apparently.
Controversial. Well, there's a controversy going on.
And this is the flow hive, which is a super system or a frame system that actually allows you to extract honey without opening the hive. If you didn't know that, I don't know.
I think there's a whole alarm bell going off for me in that.
Okay.
Anyway, I digress.
This is an article from England, and it's from Permaculture website. And Helen talks to one of the creators and addresses some concerns from natural beekeepers. And Helen speaks to the creators of the flow hive and its critics. Now, I think this is a great article because she actually interviews a natural beekeeper as well, and also one of the guys from the flow hive, and they just sort of answer the questions.
Yeah, I think that it is good to get this perspective. I think if they'd been using it for 5 years and then released it to the market, then I think there'd be a bit more substantial information to go from. So I think it is controversial because of the different ways that we deal with hives, but there's also the side of this new product which raises a few concerns about the bees being able to be, healthy enough to feed and that kind of thing. So there's a lot of questions there, but read this article because it does point out some of those things that, you might have been thinking about for yourself. And I don't know what the New Zealand government really feel about this hive. They haven't really put out any statements or comments about it.
Yeah, I don't see the, I don't think it'll work with Manuka honey. Well, I know it won't, so.
Yeah, Manuka honey's a lot thicker, so the minute that the weather changes, you probably won't get any honey coming out.
No, because you can decap a frame of Manuka honey and you can hold it up and it will not drip forever. So.
Indeed.
So anyway, we'll see. I know we've got a customer that's got one of these, haven't we? So we'll have to see what they think of it. Yeah,
we'll probably hear more about that over time. I just hope, and my thought would be, you need to still inspect your hive. It's very important. And
absolutely. And that moves on to our next story about Hives Lost. I Miss Our Bees by Marina
Steinke.
This is a story about American foul brood incident near Christchurch. And she says, destroying and then burning a hive was the cruelest thing I've ever had to do.
Yeah.
All entrances to the hive had to be blocked and petrol poured over the bees. This is a story about
it's
how
awful.
she had to destroy some of her hives because of AFB.
Yeah, it's really tough for us, but imagine for the bees, you know. I'll read this article, guys. It speaks for itself, and, you know, I get quite emotional about what's going on here in New Zealand with AFB, with people not managing their hives enough. But then in saying that, it's anyone can get AFB, and, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. But, you know, my concern with the flow hive is that people think you don't need to inspect, and it's going to be disastrous, isn't it, for the bee industry?
Yeah, I think probably what people don't realise is that if you take up beekeeping, what they did in the 1900s is not what you do today, because the 21st century beekeeper is facing things that they never faced in the 19th century. So, you know, and that's where a lot of even older beekeepers go wrong. You know, they just don't inspect their hives enough. They try methods that are not proven or are creating more risk for the bees. So, you know, we've had a case just recently, 3 colonies just gone.
Yeah.
And it breaks my heart to see that loss. And I know that the beekeepers love their bees, and it's heartbreaking.
Absolutely, and we've had some feedback about this from Marion Evans. This is so sad. I heard a similar story recently about a rogue beekeeper scandal in Auckland, an AFB scandal. So that's interesting. I wonder what that was about.
Yeah, that is interesting. And, you know, I just think people, if you're going to other people's apiaries, you know, be courteous and remember your beekeeper hygiene. Use strong bleach solutions to spray the soles of your feet. Keep the cab of your car clean. Make sure your gloves are clean. If you're going in someone else's hive, use their gloves or use fresh, clean plastic gloves so you don't spread anything.
Absolutely.
Keep your suit sprayed as well with the bleach solution if you're going to go in with a suit that is not known to that hive. Otherwise, when I go into a colony, I'm using fresh gear, I'm using their suits, their tools, their gloves. So that is the best advice, and your footwear must be bleached before you go and walk around that person's property.
Absolutely. And yeah, speaking to Michael Jordan last week, she said that they haven't seen AFB for 10 years. It's amazing, isn't it? So
yeah.
you can get rid of it if you do, you know, you're diligent.
Yeah, and if you've lost your hives and I believe that you need to spray around once all the fire's gone and everything's buried properly, because you should be burning them into a hole that you can cover up and level off, then spray around that site with a bleach solution as well, because that's where the spores will be, and put a bit of disinfectant in that as well. So
yeah, absolutely.
And here we've got Tracy. She's made a comment. Tracy Ultra, how terrible, poor bees. I loved watching my dad's bees and our fruit trees flourished. Keepers have some huge challenges and disappointments that appear to be partly caused by intensive production. I'm not so sure about that.
Yeah, I think that can be, yeah, I don't know.
What does intensive production, does she mean too many beekeepers, or does she mean too much monocultures?
I think she means too many beekeepers in areas, like especially the Manuka areas maybe.
Well, that could be a factor, so yeah, interesting. I think as time goes on, the people who can't manage their bees properly will slowly go by the wayside, but what a painful process in the meantime.
Absolutely.
So, Gary, an article from Leah Sotile in the Washington Post. Beekeepers are dying out.
That's right.
How can we get young people into bees?
That's what I'm asking, because beekeeping in America is already a growing industry. That's a good idea.
That leads you to a whole other discussion about all these shades of grey.
No, I haven't read that book.
Me neither. I've just heard lots of rumours.
Indeed. Over the past decade, billions of bees have been lost to colony collapse disorder, an umbrella term for factors thought to be killing honeybees in droves. and threatening the nation's food supply. Amid the dive, the beekeepers have been going extraordinary lengths to save both their bees and their livelihoods. This is a great article. I really enjoyed this. But, we do need to get involved with beekeeping, get young people involved in bees, because a lot of the beekeepers are old, and a lot of them actually retired when varroa mites and CCD started happening.
One thing I have noticed is that some of those who retired from, the loss of hives back then are starting again. And that's awesome. We love that. But, they need to understand that it's not the same as when they were keeping bees. And, a lot of the methods that are used, commercial methods are, causing a lot of issues for the bees themselves, like killing queens off every season. Now, there is no way that their bees are going to develop any varroa management and beekeeper hygiene practices, bee hygiene, if they are going to be constantly killed, because they're not changing the genetic ability of the bees to manage that loss. So I think keeping queens alive is something that a lot of the older beekeepers were doing. So I suggest that people start to value their queens more.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you never give the bees a chance to adapt to that environment, do you, if you keep changing the queens every year? So absolutely,
and those queens are carrying with them the effects of that issue. So to kill them off is just saying, okay, we're just back at square one. So my suggestion is read this article and have a good look at what the older beekeepers used to do, and then remember that we're in the 21st century and we've got a lot of issues that we're dealing with, mainly because of what the varroa actually does to the bees, and people just don't seem to be understanding how bad varroa can be.
Absolutely, and think of ways you can get young kids involved in beekeeping, and leave some comments in the show notes.
Yeah, and I think that talking to Oren Fox, I feel quite lifted up by that, and a lot of our customers are buying children's bee suits because they're encouraging their grandchildren to take up beekeeping and be part of what they're doing, and the kids are absolutely loving it. So this article, give it a read, guys.
Absolutely. Now we're moving across to Australia. Sweet deal leaves a sting for Australian bee honey producers. This is from the Sydney Morning Herald, and there are concerns that some imported honey is mainly made from plant sugars and not honey at all. And Australian beekeepers are struggling to compete with cheap imported honey. And this lady in this article, Jodie, is refusing to import honey for her company, Jodie Goldsworthy. And she's and her customers are backing her, so this is amazing.
I love this, and I reckon if you just talk to the ordinary Joe guy on the street, would you prefer honey from your own country or someone else's? I reckon I know what the answer will be.
Well, this is a great argument for not importing honey into New Zealand, isn't it? This is why we don't need to import honey into New Zealand.
Yeah. And, I know that the Aussies had a tough year last year, but we've got a little article with some photos there from what's going on at the moment in Aussie, and that was shared by Thomas. So this season looks better for them.
Absolutely. And we had some feedback from you guys. Grant Turnpenny. We know Grant, don't we?
Yeah, hi, Grant.
And Australian importers do not care about their customers. Strong words from Grant.
Yeah, I think so, and I agree. I think if they really cared, they'd give them a good, healthy product from their own country and their own environment, and that's much better for your own health.
Absolutely,
so, and Craig Lovell also makes a comment saying, hope someone sorts out that mess fast. I agree.
Absolutely.
Go, Craig. Thanks, Grant. Thanks, Craig, for your comments. We agree wholeheartedly.
Absolutely. Okay, questions from you.
And boy, have you guys been keeping us busy. We've had questions from you about so many things, and phone calls and emails about what's happening in your hives at the moment. And the first one we'll go on to is what, Gary?
How to make a wasp trap for your beehive.
This is interesting. There's
lots of ideas.
Yeah, lots of ideas come to mind. I think probably my first piece of advice would be, rather than worry about a wasp trap, do a search on the property and find out where those wasps' nests are, because that's your real first way to deal with wasps. So they won't be far away, maybe 100 metres at the most, and if you can kill the whole colony, then you will need to have a bigger entrance and landing board for your bees, because they'll be out there in the sun enjoying their life without wasps.
Absolutely, but I am going to also do a new blog post about this, and I heard, this is what I heard. Do you want to hear?
Oh, what did you hear, Gary? Yeah.
This is a wasp blower.
Or was it a wasp sound is like...
Well, I don't know, they just...
Yeah, they sound so different. When you buy the colonies, you can really hear the difference. Anyway, so know your enemy.
The solution I've been told is a good one, is 2-to-1 sugar, tablespoon of jam, drop of vinegar.
The solution I've been told is...
And half a banana peel. So I'm going to do a test on this. I'm going to do a blog post and I'm going to do a test on it. And as we discussed before, I was speaking to Tony in New York, and he had some ideas too, because he has different ideas for the different parts of the season. So
that's
they
good.
Have, I think meat and some parts, and he uses pineapple juice too.
I think that is one of my hints. My handy hint is understand and know your enemy, and that is so relevant, isn't it?
Absolutely. So we'll have some blog posts, Jamie, about that coming up, so we'll get some ideas out there.
Okay, so the 3 ways to deal with wasps is 1, find their nests and kill them. 2nd is to know your enemy, so understand what you're dealing with and how they operate, and yes, it's very relevant for the season. And then thirdly, do some tests like Gary's going to do and see what works for you.
Yep. And if we can, and different times of the year they're after different things, because different times are after protein, different times are after sweetness.
Yeah, my experience has been at autumn, when they start preparing the wasp queens, that they are very predatory and they are just nasty.
They're nasty all year round, I find.
Yeah, more so I think then, but that's my experience, so yeah. So there are many ways to do this. Check out Gary's blog when he does his field tests.
Absolutely. Next question, how often can you use oxalic acid vaporizer on a hive? This is from Sam in the South Island.
Yeah, the South Island of New Zealand are starting to experience more Varroa presence, and I just want to do a shout out to all you guys down there and the efforts that you're putting in to manage the Varroa issue in a very proactive way, because we have sold heaps of our vaporizers and oxalic acid that you use in them. It's a really exciting tool that is a great help to dealing with Varroa and in winter. So it's very non-invasive. So how often can you use it? As oxalic acid vaporization is an organic product, you can use it for a long period of time. What people make mistakes in doing is doubling the dose of oxalic acid, which is just not the way to do it. You don't double anything in any treatment, whether it's synthetic or organic. You follow the method and the amounts recommended, but with the oxalic acid you can extend it. So our recommendation is a 1/4 teaspoon once a week over 4 weeks. So if you go out on Sunday morning at 11 o'clock and you do your treatment, you do it again the following 3 Sundays. So all in all, you're covering 28 days, and that's the full gestation period of a bee emerging to the new eggs going into the cells. Now, if you do the treatment and you find there's still Varroa, you need to understand how you're going to monitor your results. So using any kind of treatment, before you even put a treatment in, you must do a mite count. Okay,
Yes.
whatever method you use, make it consistent. So if you do a natural mite fall over 48 hours, then use that same method when you've finished all your treatments. So here's how it will go, right? You do the treatment, you do the monitoring before you treat. That will give you an amount of varroa in the hive, okay? Then you start your treatments. You do it to cover those 4 weeks with the oxalic acid vaporization system. Then you wait a week after you've finished your treatments, and then you do another mite count. Now the before count and the after you've finished count should show a difference. If the difference is not enough for you, you can continue to do it for another few weeks. So if you want to do it again for 4 weeks, then go and do it. But never increase the dosage of what you're using.
Yeah, there's no point anyway, because it's just you're just going to overdose them and waste oxalic acid. So
yeah, and the thing is that some people say, oh, look, I've been treating and there's huge amounts of mites falling and there's this and look at them all and it's just getting worse. Well, that's a good thing, because while you're treating, you want to see good mite fall. You want to have a sticky board in there to capture all those dead bodies. And the more you see, the better, because that means the treatment is working, okay? But when you're doing the monitoring as to overall results, you do a before count and an after count. And then what happens in between should be lots and lots of mite fall. And that's the key to it. And people say, oh, I've got so many mites falling and it's not working. But, they haven't followed the monitoring method first, and that's more important. So you can do it for as long as you want to, as long as you use the same quarter teaspoon and use the same method. And don't forget to leave the hive shut for 10 minutes after you've finished the vaporization, because that helps the bees to move the vapor around the colony.
absolutely. And it's great. Thanks for that, Margaret.
Yeah, and if you want this product, we do sell it in our online shop. So Gary can put a link straight to this product if you want to go ahead and get that. And it's a very popular product. It's made here by a Kiwi guy and it's local.
Absolutely. And the next question is from Brian in Northland. He wants to know how to attract a swarm of bees.
Oh, you know about this one. You've done this before, eh? You've had success.
I've had swarm lures, and you can use you can either use commercially bought products, like there's one called Swarm Commander, which we tried last season, and also, or you can use lemongrass oil on a bit of tissue, a few drops every couple of weeks, just keep that smell coming in there. Or you can use old comb, not with honey in it, just like old empty comb. That's a good attractant, and just put them like near 300 metres away from your beehives, or around in forest areas or places where you're allowed to put beehives, and you'll find that swarms will be attracted to them. Also, when you do swarm lures, put them up about 5 metres up a tree, because the higher the better. So they seem to, I don't know why it works, but they just seem to find that they prefer the higher ones better.
Yeah, I think probably my point, I think that they'd probably be attracted to some of the pollen or nectar in the tree that they go to. So make it a tree that may be attractive to the bees.
Yep. And just make a small entrance hole, like about 1 inch wide. So
Yeah, it doesn't need to be too big, eh?
No. And the next question is from Sue in Auckland. What are the different feeding methods? Any ideas here, Margaret?
Oh, you know me, I'm full of it. Anyway, moving on.
What ideas? Or?
Oh, yeah, ideas.
Yeah.
I'm full of them. I've always got an opinion too, so as we all know. Anyway, yeah. Well, there are different methods. I know that some of the older beekeepers used to make these wooden sort of pieces of wood with indentations in it, and they used to use the old AG preservative jars and fill that with honey, put the cover over it, make some holes in that, very fine 1.5 millimeter holes in that, and then put the liquid in, put the lid on, and the preserving part, that circle on there, then turn it upside down. That method can be used out the front of the hive, which I don't really agree with, because I'm always concerned about robbing and attracting other bees. I think if you're going to feed a colony, you should always try and put the feed inside the colony and reduce the entrance if it's a time of the year where the bees are very hungry and other bees might want to go in there. And I'd always try to combine a robbing screen with any feeding you do, so you can give your girls a better opportunity to guard the colony. So we use a top feeder. If you use the AG jars with the holes in the lid, you can just put a hive box on the top. Have your hive mat first with a hole in it that the bees can come and go. They will go up and explore in that top level, and they will go and feed off that honey. And that method is good because it's inside the hive, and the box will be big enough to take the jar. We've got what we call a top feeder. It's plastic, the only plastic that I really don't mind in the hive, which is set in a wooden frame and fits on the very top of the hive. And the benefit with this one is that you don't have to put a hive mat underneath it. You just put the hive mat on the top like normal. It's like a roof liner that goes under the tin lid. And then when it's not so good weather, you can just pop it up and pour your liquid feed in, or put your honey cakes on there, and the bees will come up and feed within the hive, so it's less dangerous to attracting robbing. So honey cakes you can use, which is basically the bees' honey, and it's just stored for them for the season, and you just mark out which hive it is and everything, so you're putting your honey from that original hive back into their hive. So those are methods. There's other ones that we've tried, but we didn't like them so much because of the loss of bees. And one of them was a plastic feeder tray, and we got advice to put bits of straw and that stuff in, but we still found that the bees drowned. So that's why I like the top feeder, because you can put a bit of an insect mesh that the bees can walk on to go into the honey, and they won't drown in honey. So that's awesome.
Is that like a frame feeder you're talking about, eh? The one that fits in like a frame?
The top feeder...
before you talked about the feeder that a lot of bees drowned in.
Yeah, that's the one that's a frame feeder, which it's like a frame, same size as a frame, and you can put it in the side, but that's the one where we found that they were drowning. Yeah. I mean, that's the one that we used originally when we first started, but we don't use them anymore. We try to contain it in a top feeder, because the top feeder is easy to access. You don't have to intensely go into the hive to do it. So that's why I love it, and that's worked really well for us.
Absolutely. Well, that's great news, great information there, Margaret, so thank you.
Yeah, thanks. Is it Susan, Brian and Sam?
And Jamie.
Thanks so much,
guys,
for your questions. And we've had lots of emails about what's going on here in Auckland. And some people are saying that they feel that the treatments aren't working. But my advice is to make sure that the hive is dry, because often treatments don't work if your hive boxes are wet. And that just stops the bees from being able to manage the varroa situation as well, because with damp there's the risk of bacteria and the spread of viruses. So keeping your hives dry, your hive boxes dry, check your baseboard, make sure there's no waste on there, and keep those baseboards nice and dry, and that means your colony will be healthier, and treatments work more effectively with dry hiveware.
Absolutely. And if you've got any questions, email us at info@kiwimana.co.nz. And now, breaking news.
Breaking news?
Yeah, we've got this thing called SpeakPipe, which you can actually click on. There's a link here on the blog post.
I had a bit of fun with this one. It's so easy too.
You had a bit of fun with it?
Yeah, just...
Oh, okay. Well, we did get a message. I'm not sure who it's from. We'll be playing that in a minute. Anyway, you click send voicemail, and then you can actually record a message from your computer or even from your iPad, we discovered. And then that message will come to us and we can play it on the next podcast. So if you've got
where can people find that?
On the right-hand side of the website, there's a thing that says...
On our homepage?
Send voicemail.
Yeah, it's a bit of fun. Have a bit of fun with it, guys. We'd love to hear your little messages too.
And we'd love to hear your voices.
Absolutely.
You hear us enough, so get some other people on there.
It's our turn to hear from you guys. So it's called SpeakPipe.
Yep. And
was it SpeakPipe?
SpeakPipe.
SpeakPipe, depending what accent you have. Not that we have an accent.
No. Well, let's play this one we got from someone. I don't know who it is. Wait a minute, let's play it.
Hi there. Well, I just want to say that I think the best podcast that I've listened to is the Kiwi Mana Buzz. It's just awesome. And yeah, if you're going to listen to any podcast, that's the one.
Oh my goodness gracious me, that was fantastic.
That sounds a lot like you.
Enjoy. enjoy, I say.
Anyway, that's how easy it is.
Love to hear from you guys too.
And Margaret did that on her iPad, and it was simple to do, and we get a little email when you send us one, and we can add it to the show notes, add it to the podcast. It's
very simple, guys, and I'm a bit of a technophobe myself, so it was easy for me, so and it's free and doesn't spread any viruses on your computer, so it's nice and safe, so go for it.
Absolutely. If Margaret can do it, anybody can.
Amen.
Okay, let's move into feedback from you guys. Okay, feedback from you guys.
Heaps of cool feedback.
We got a really cool message here from Paul Splain, who actually came over to visit us the other day.
Yeah, great to meet this guy.
Let's play that and see what his favourite podcast is. This is all part of International Podcast Day. Wait a minute.
Hi, this is Paul Spain from the New Zealand Tech Podcast and the New Zealand Business Podcast. My favourite new podcast at the moment actually is the Kiwi Mana Podcast.
Well, that was great.
Yeah, cheers for that, Paul. Fantastic.
We really appreciate that. And seriously, guys, we did not pay people to recommend our podcast. And I really didn't. Anyway, and he's from the New Zealand New Zealand Business Podcast, and he also does one called New Zealand Tech Podcast, which is quite cool, eh?
Yeah.
For all those techies out there.
Lots of new stuff coming through that he has a look at and shares with his feedback with the public.
Absolutely. So if you're into tech and you want to listen to what's happening in New Zealand, because he interviewed a guy from Microsoft the other day, so he's interviewing some big people, eh? It's good. Yeah.
It's I love it. And speaking of sharing the love.
Oh, this is a great message from Meg, isn't it?
Yep.
Do you want to read this one?
Oh, I'd love to read this one.
Okay.
Thanks, Gary. It says, "Hello, hoppity and awesome." Get that. Anyway, this is from Meg, and she says, "I love your podcast. I listen on my Android phone and can't find a feedback option to tell you. So on her iPhone evidently has this, but Android seems not to. So I typically listen while I am doing chores on our dairy farm." Fantastic. So all round looking at the lifestyle anyway, and often laugh out loud. In the Midwest of the US where I live, we would say you are a hoot.
You are a hoot, Margaret.
Yes, and you too, Dal. I enjoy both the Gary and Margaret show version when the two of you chat about this and that, and the special guest interview shows that teach me about beekeeping around the world and always make me resolve to do a better job engaging with my own 4 hives.
Wow.
I confess that I am a laissez-faire beekeeper. I'm afraid that although I guess Phil Howard would say that's okay too. At any rate, bananas to you. From Meg. Thanks, Meg. And check out Meg and Kevin's Minnesota farm in the US of A at Dairydale Farm.
DairydaleFarm.com, and I think they sell organic milk, and they sell beef as well, grass-fed beef. So
yum, yum, yum.
For all you guys into real food, check them out.
Yeah,
I'm not sure if
real food is the best way to go, isn't it? I mean, just real healthy food straight from good healthy earth.
That's right.
With good healthy natural stuff, eh?
Absolutely. I'm not sure if they ship around the country, but I'm sure they ship around Minnesota, so
check them out. And if you can support these people, local is best and local is fresh.
And remember, when you give them a call or go and see them, this is what you need to say.
Banana!
And they will know where you came from.
And she'll say, what a hoot you are.
So thanks, Meg.
Yeah, and what's happened on Twitter?
We got a message from Herschel in Virginia. Herschel in Virginia says, started listening to your podcast from episode 1 and now he's up to number 8. He's enjoying every minute while learning from you. Margaret threw me a loop while talking about the mesh boards, and it took a while to recognise she was meaning mesh, not mish.
Mish.
And he's definitely not the southern accent I'm used to in Virginia.
This is awesome. I mean, I think that's why I just love what we do, because we are meeting people from all over the world, and it's, our differences actually just make us closer, because, it's just loving everyone where they're from and how we are all pretty special, I reckon. And I hope we sort that mish out and that everyone knows what I'm talking about.
Absolutely. Beekeepers of the world unite.
Yeah, thanks, Meg. Thanks for Herschel, and I almost said Virginia. Anyway, thanks, Meg and Herschel, and we appreciate people taking time out, and we appreciate you taking time to listen. And what are we up to next, Gary?
Well, if you guys want to keep in touch with us, the best way to do that is to join up for our newsletter. We come out every week, usually, and we talk about beekeeping tips, beekeeping news, and we also tell you when we've released the new podcasts. So join up for our newsletter at kiwimana.co.nz/sign up.
Yeah, I think that this is awesome, because a lot of people, when they sign up, they always ask us a question about where they're at with their beekeeping. And, we will always do our best to get back to you as soon as we can. So we offer about 3 days response, and with the beekeeping season coming on, we have been really busy, so just bear with us, guys, and that's we'll get back to you and give you our views and opinions, and maybe some handy hints that you can use as a guide and see how you go.
Yeah, absolutely. The newsletter's going really well, isn't it? So people are enjoying it.
Yeah, how many people are on our newsletter now?
Oh, about 1,300, I think.
Wow, geez,
a few of you out there now. So we're getting, it's good.
It is. It's fantastic. And we just want to encourage people to keep bees and keep them healthy and understand disease and good management practices and beekeeper hygiene. Beekeeper hygiene for me, as it comes to this 7th year of us doing this work, is a real key factor to stop spreading disease.
Absolutely. Well, that's our show, so I hope you guys enjoyed our special show, International Podcast Day today, guys. So get out there today and tell all your friends about podcasting and how it's fantastic and how you can learn how to speak like a Kiwi and other things you can learn from our podcast.
Cheers, guys, and we'll see you next time.
Yep, on the Kiwi Mana Buzz.
See ya.
Okay, it's International Podcast Day, and we've got some special guests here today. We've got Zach, Snow, and Caleb. What's your favourite podcast, Caleb?
Caleb and Snow.
What about you, Zach?
Kiwi Mana.